We've had such a joy doing that. Well, first, Nate, thank you so much for leading worship for us. We've been really blessed to hear the Lord through you. So thank you so much, Nate. And then our sponsors, like Pastor Mike said, we had some really great sponsors. The one in the second row is kind of cute. But Jay. Yes, no, but we had some really great sponsors and some really good kids. And so it really made the weekend really fun and exciting. And well, for those who have not been here for a while, or maybe if you're new, our D Now was this weekend. And our theme was Outcast. And what we talked about was the woman at the well. And we talked about how she was the outcast of her society, a reject, a nobody, a woman that had 5 husbands, and then the man that she was living with was not her husband. And so she was full of sin. And even though she was rejected by the Jews, even by Samaritan men, and even her own Samaritan women, Jesus was able to reach through all of that sin and all of that nastiness and pull her in. And so we talked about what it looks like to reach the outcast, to reach those who are on the fringe of society. And so we had a really awesome and really good weekend. I really enjoyed it, even though I'm tired and I can't even talk right. It was a lot of fun. And so what we're going to do right now is we've got a couple of students that are going to share kind of their experience of D-Now from their heart and say what they really liked about D-Now. So I'm going to let them come up one at a time. Who's the first volunteer? Luke it is.
So, I'm Luke. Hold on, Luke. I'm good? Okay, I'm good. Okay, so the first night we had our lesson, and then the boys went into the youth room, and we had our first devotional. And we started playing soccer in the youth room at 9 o'clock. And when we finished at about 10:15. We set up 2 goals and played for an hour straight. So yes, we stunk. So we had a lot of fun, but the point of Disciple Now is to come closer to God. We're supposed to have fun, but at the same time it's a time to come closer to God. So when we I don't think we didn't emphasize enough how great Nate did with the music, for us listening his music, because I'd come in and we'd stand up and start singing, and my thoughts would be everywhere. My brain was everywhere, but in the service, thinking about what we're gonna do next, what we're gonna have for dinner, and halfway through the song, all that stuff was gone from my mind, and I was focused on the sermon. And so he moved through me during the music, and then I was ready for the sermon. So that's my first highlight, was the music. The second one is the devotionals. With the boys, we'd have our small groups, and it was awesome how we could set aside the book and have a conversation, the boys, and just you could tell God was working through us, and it was a conversation. God was working through us and talking through us, and we got to know each other better, and it was just awesome how we came closer together. And last night was probably, how do I put this? We came, it was our last night, and I opened up and I was pretty vulnerable about some stuff. And the guys who were there, they didn't judge me. It was a safe space, and if anything, it brought me closer to them, the guys. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Abby, if you guys don't know me. This was the first D now that I have ever been to at this church, and I was honestly just amazed. God definitely moved, especially during the worship and the sermons. Like, it was just absolutely phenomenal how the Spirit just moved in all of us. I felt it. I could see it moving through other people. We all grew spiritually. I loved small groups the most, probably. I loved the girls. We all just bonded, and it really just, we talked a lot about how we can impact other people at our schools with us, and not just like within the church, but the people that need Jesus the most, and how we can just be showing kindness to them and including them, because throughout like the high school that I go to, there's so many people that are outcast, and they just, no one loves on them. And that is a huge conviction that I have for not showing the love to them. And it's just really impacted me to change my life and to go out there and make a difference in those people's lives, and to be more intentional about loving on them and sharing the love of Christ with them. Last night was probably the best night. We had not spiritual, but we had a glow in the dark party, and they kidnapped all of us, put blindfolds on us, drove us around town. Yeah, Lori took me to Tecumseh. It was really scary, but it was really fun. And we had a blast just bonding together and playing around and just dancing and getting sweaty and screaming our heads off, playing grog or whatever in the dark. It's a scary game. But it was just, it was a lot of fun to just bond with everybody and to just come together as a youth group and love on one another and grow closer to Christ. So, thank you.
Sorry, I'm really short. So, my name's Riley. If you don't know, okay. And so, I had a lot of fun at D Now. It's my first time going, and it was exciting because, like, I mean, I bonded so well with those girls because, like two of them I've never met in my life, but yeah, I found out one of them is like really good friends with my sister. So. Okay. So, we had a lot of fun technically getting kidnapped, because that was really scary. Oh, yeah. And it was a lot of fun because we got to go down to Pops and get a drink and stuff. Yeah. And yeah. And well, I mean, we did have a lot of fun. Like small groups was my favorite too, because like it's just because you got to bond with the girls so much, and like I was too opening up, and I was like, it was like whoa, and and everyone is, and like yeah, they were just like, oh yeah, it was amazing, yeah. So.
Hold on. Before we go on, no one was actually kidnapped. I just want to make that clear, okay? That no one was actually kidnapped.
Yeah, Dino this year was it was pretty special, and it was a really fun time, and I really enjoyed the lesson this year about outcasts, because it really hammered in something that I knew in my head but never really actually thought of, about how anyone really is useful for the kingdom. Like the woman at the well, even though everyone despised her, she was still able to go and be a messenger for Christ. So that was a lot of fun. And also, it really showed this weekend how much love and work the sponsors put into DNOW. It was just a great time, and it was so much fun, but also the serious moments were great, and I really learned a lot during those times and grew closer with the guys especially. So they really just balanced that out a great amount, and I learned a lot more than I thought I was going to.
Hey. Okay, so I was just last minute asked to come up here and explain, like, on a sponsor standpoint of this weekend. And it was really, really cool just to get to watch these kids, especially with worship. That's always my favorite thing to do. Plus, like, I love worship. So watching the kids do that is amazing. Listening to a lot of the things they say, like after lessons and after worship, is fantastic. I'm going to brag on Abby for a second. Last night after worship, we went back to the Taylors for our in-house devotion thingy. And I just heard her just expressing to Lori like something, like just letting go of her nervousness and anxiety of her grandpa being in the hospital. And she just said she just let go and let God take it. She's like, I don't even care. I mean, she does care, but she was just like, I don't even care about this anxiety anymore. I just want him to take it and just go with it. And that was just amazing listening to such a young lady say stuff like that. It was just awesome just to see God working through them. And I just thank Austin and Jen for allowing me to be a part of this weekend. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so like everyone said, D-Now went really, really great. And we almost went the whole weekend without breaking anything, except about 35 minutes ago, they thought it would be a great idea to play Keep Away in the youth room and busted a light. So we were this close. We were this close to not breaking anything, but hey, it's just a light. But other than that, it was a great weekend, a ton of fun. Or I said the first day, a fun a ton, and it was just a blast. And I'm anxious. I'm anxious for next year and for D-Now, and I'm excited to see. I'm honestly really excited to see what God's going to do with this weekend and what He's going to do for the rest of our lives. And so I'm excited to see how God impacted these students' lives and how they're going to take that and run with it. So I'm excited to see that. But we're going to have a really quick lesson. So if you've got your Bibles, turn to the book of Esther. And you're going to start in chapter 2. And as you're turning there, I want to tell you a quick story. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was a part of an organization called Young Life. And Young Life was this non-denominational organization that sought to reach teenagers with the good news of Christ through games and through fun and easy-to-learn lessons. And it was great. And it's not just a really small local organization either. It is huge. It's got camps almost in every state in the United States and with camps all over the world. And so it was this really big organization, and I loved it. So being a participant in it and fully believing in it, I wanted to serve in some way. And so I spoke to my leader, and through a program, I was able to spend a month in Jasper, Georgia at a camp called Sharp Top Cove. And before you start to think I had some lofty position, I was a dishwasher. So I went to a camp and I washed dishes for a whole month. And what was really great and what I really loved about the camp was that it was located right in the Appalachian Mountains. So you would wake up every day and you would just see this beautiful scenery. And my younger, skinnier self, yeah, I hear the laughter. I would go on a run every morning. And I would wake up and I would shower because I had this thing where I had to shower before I run. I don't know, it's just a thing I do. And I would tie my shoes, I'd get my shoes on, lace them up, get my running gear on, and I would go running. And one day I went on a run, and I would just run around the campus of the camp of the camp. And being a naive southeastern Oklahoma guy, I really didn't think anything about it. Just go on a run. And I had my earbuds in, and I'm running, and I hear this really heavy breathing, and it's like, and I'm like, maybe I'm just not used to the to the altitude. Maybe I'm not used to this new environment. The tree pollen's maybe messing with me. I'm not really sure. And it's just so deep. And I'm thinking, golly, I must be really, really tired. And so I run a little bit further, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. And so finally, I take my earbuds out, and I look behind me, and there is a black bear behind me, like not a full grown one, but like a adolescent black bear. And at that moment, I thought, well, I'm pretty quick, but I can't outrun this. And I was terrified. And I really only knew, thank goodness I liked Animal Planet in high school, because I watched Bear Grylls, and he told me what to do. And he told me that if you come across a bear, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to get really big and act like a crazy person. And so that's what I did. I mean, after a moment of like just looking at the bear, thinking that is actually a bear and it's not in a cage and I could be at supper. And I got really big and acted like a crazy person. And the bear ran away. And golly, I was thinking, thank goodness. And thinking back on it, I thought about, I should have just drew a sea bear circle around me, and it would have saved me. That's a SpongeBob reference, but I was so terrified. But I was so far from camp that I just had to continue my run. So after the bear ran off, I ran back to my cabin and got dressed for the day. Though granted, I didn't go running again for some time, because that scared me pretty good. But that was a terrifying experience at camp. And so now you're probably thinking, well, Austin, that's a really good story, but what does that have to do with Esther? Well, this weekend we've been talking about outcast. And we talked about the woman at the well and how she was an outsider. And above all that, Jesus found value and worth in her, and that those things didn't matter. But there's another woman in Scripture I think was an outcast. And she wasn't an outcast like the woman at the well was. She, but in a completely different way, she was an outcast, and her name was Esther. Now, unlike the woman at the well, Esther had power, she had wealth, she had some kind of influence, but she was an outcast at even the most highest levels of honor in ancient society. And just like I had with that situation I had with that bear, Esther also had an encounter. She had two choices to make. She could either be faithfully aggressive or fearfully passive. And so she was in a situation where there was a big bear right in front of her. And she had two options: either lay down and die or to take action. And so we're going to pick up there in Esther 2. And so what's leading up to is that the king at this time really had a disagreement with his queen and wasn't really fans with her, and said, you know what, I'm going to go find a new queen. And so this is where we pick up with Esther. And Esther is a Jew, and she's come here. The Babylon Empire has conquered Israel and Judah and made all the Jews slaves. So now they're here living out of their homeland as servants. And the Jews have lived here for some quite time. And so when the king comes looking for a queen, her stepfather, Mordecai, says, hey, Esther, you're going to do this. You're going to try out for this queen. And so what it looked like was a 4-month spa treatment of preparing her to be queen. And so that's our first point. We're going to hear here in chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. So if you're there in chapter 2, I should turn there too. If you don't know where it's at, right after Nehemiah. I knew I forgot something. Forgot to bookmark it. There we go. Esther chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. It says here, when the king's command and edict became public knowledge, and when many young women were gathered at the fortress of Susa under Haggai's supervision, Esther was taken to the palace into the supervision of Haggai, keeper of women. The young woman pleased him and gained his favor, so that he accelerated the process of the beauty treatments and the special diet that she received. He assigned 7 hand-picked female servants to her palace and transformed her and her servants to the Harlem's best quarters. So the first thing Esther did was prepare. And so, and much like any activity you do or that we do, you have to prepare. You can't just walk out on a baseball field and expect to be the best baseball player around. You can't walk onto the wrestling mat and expect to wrestle every person. I learned that the hard way in the youth room. I'm not the best wrestler. You can't just go on a run without first getting prepared. And so preparation is essential for success. And we know, and probably all of us in this room know, that a lack of preparation always leads to chaos. That if you didn't prepare for something and you get thrown into the situation, it's going to lead to chaos. When Jen and I first started dating, I thought it'd be a great idea. We ran the half marathon together, and I didn't train till like 2 days before the marathon, thinking, okay, I've ran in high school, so I think I'm pretty good. I got the muscle memory. And oh Lordy, that half marathon kicked my rear, and it was rough. And so we can see that a lack of preparation can lead to chaos. And what we see here in Esther is that she had no idea what God was grooming her for. She had no idea that God was going to put her in a position that he was preparing her to save his people. That Esther would one day be the one that interceded upon the Jews' behalf to the king. She had no idea about that. She had no idea what God was preparing her to do. And she did it so faithfully, without grunting, without going back to Mordecai and saying, you know what, that diet, I really can't live without pizza. I can't live without Dr. Pepper. So this is not worth it. It's not worth it, Mordecai. It's not worth it to be queen. She doesn't do that. She does it faithfully. And so, but we see it's not a one-sided thing. It wasn't that God was just preparing her, but Esther was taking preparation in herself. She was preparing herself as well. God was providing the opportunities, and Esther was preparing herself. You know, she could have just blew it off. She could have just slacked through her spa. She could have just not really been invested, but she prepared herself. Still, knowing that God put her in this position, not knowing what for, but she was going to be ready for it. No matter what happened, no matter what occurred, she was going to be ready for it. She was prepared. So, under this supervision of Haggai, she would receive what it looked like to be a queen, what a queen would look like back then, what a queen said, what a queen did, what a queen dressed like. So God was grooming her for a position that she had no idea. So I want to ask you, church, are you prepared? Are you prepared for what God's going to do in your life? It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter if you're a youth or if you're older or in the middle. It doesn't matter. Are you prepared? Because God's not done working with you. No matter what age you are, no matter what Sunday school division you're in, God is still going to be working in you. So are you prepared? Are you lacking preparation? Because God has a great plan for you. Are you prepared to answer when he says go? When he says do? Are you rooted in his word so that you can hear him when he says, I need you to do this? Are you prepared? And on the flip side, are you rooted? Are you prepared enough that when things go wrong, it doesn't just fall apart? Because it's a two-sided sword here. Is that, yes, you got to be prepared for what God's going to say to you, but also be prepared for when things go wrong. I can only imagine Esther going through this, thinking about the side effects of not becoming queen, of just being a reject, an outcast of outcasts. Are you prepared for when life and when the enemy throws everything at you? When you lose your job, when you lose a family member, when you lose a friend? Are you rooted in Christ for that? Are you prepared? So, church, I'm going to give you a piece of advice that I did when I started running that trail. Lace up your shoes, get your jacket on, and be ready. Be prepared for what God's going to say to you. Because I can guarantee you, without a doubt, that God is going to be working in your life. He works in all of us. Be ready to answer him. Lace up your shoes. Second, what Esther did, she confronted the situation. And we're going to see that. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. Sorry. She confronted the situation. Chapter 4, verse 16, and then 5 through 7. Go and assemble all. I skipped a little bit. Let me go back. So, during this beauty time, Esther becomes queen. And she is now the queen. The king has found favor in her, and the king is pleased with her. So she becomes the queen. She is exalted above everyone else. And there's this another man, and his name is Haman. And Haman is our bad guy. He's not good. He's the thug. He's not the one that you want to be with. And so Haman and Mordecai, her stepfather, sits at the gate every day. Sits at the gate, and Haman is exalted. What Scripture says that he's the second-hand man. And Haman walks through the gate one day, and everyone's bowing to him except Mordecai. And Mordecai, and Haman gets infuriated. He's mad beyond all get out, and he says, why aren't you bowing to me? And Mordecai says, I'm not going to bow to you. So Haman goes to the king, and he attacks Mordecai, and he's like, listen, this man has insulted you, he's insulted me, we need to solve this problem. So the king, angry, issues this edict, and it goes something like this. He says, listen, on the 24th day of Adar, all the Jews, you have the right to kill the women, the children, the men, and plunder all their goods. And they can't fight back. And so the king's infuriated. He issues this edict, and it's done. So now we've reached the situation where Esther has that big issue. She can either do two things: the faithfully aggressive or fearfully passive. No one knows that she's a Jew. She hid her identity. Mordecai says, don't tell anyone your identity. Don't tell them your heritage, but go through this. And so no one knows that Esther's a Jew. So she could have easily just stepped back and said, you know what? I'm safe. I don't have to take any risks. I don't have to do anything. I can just sit right here and everything would be okay. But she doesn't. Mordecai comes to her and falls before her and says, listen, this is what's going on. Your people are going to be persecuted. Your people are going to be killed. We've got to do something. You've got to do something. And so Esther's like, okay, Mordecai. I said Malachi. Mordecai, go gather up all the Jews, have them fast, put sack loins on, and be praying. I'm going to come up with something. I'll get back to you. And so she confronts the issue. And if there's a problem, you've got to address it. If you've got a bear standing in front of you, out of its cage, you're not at the zoo, you're in the wilderness, there's a bear standing in front of you, are you just going to look at it and kind of shrug and kind of walk on? No, of course not. You're going to confront the issue. You're going to do something. You have to act. In the 1950s, the U.S. government put out an official survival guide. And in this survival guide, there was an instance of what to do if you come across an anaconda in the Amazon. And the book says the anaconda is way too fast for you. So if you try to run, it's going to chase you and it's going to eat you. So the guide, and this is nuts, the guide tells you to lay down and act dead. And you cross your fingers and you pray that the snake starts from the feet up and starts to eat you whole. And that once it gets up to your chest, you take your hand, you have a knife in your hand, and you go up, and you can slice the skin or slice the snake from the inside, which is crazy to think of because the skin is so tough, the scales are so tough that your knife wouldn't be able to go through the top. So you have to wait for it to swallow you and get your knife and go it from the inside. And that's what I'm saying. You better pray it starts at the feet and not at the head. But the actual language it uses is let the snake peruse your body. Let the snake sniff you out. And it's going to decide you're dead and start from the feet up and swallow you. Now, if this is, let's say you've read this survival guide and you fully believe in it. And so you're in the Amazon and you're chopping down some vines with your machete and boom, an anaconda. So you're like, okay, I'm going to lay down, I'm going to act dead, I'm going to hope that snake eats me from the feet up. And it gets there and starts to eat you from the feet up, and it gets right here, and you say, well, I forgot my knife, so I guess I'm just gonna lie here. No, you're gonna do something about it. You're gonna take action. No one's just gonna be eaten alive. And so Esther was facing that similar problem. Her people, all her friends, all her family, the people she was closest with was about to be eaten alive, about to be annihilated. So she had to make a decision. And so what she did was she started kind of preparing a plan, and she said, okay, I'm going to go to the king's court, and I'm going to go talk to him. Now, what we've got to understand is that back in the day, back in the time of Esther, if you were to go into the king's courtroom, it was a death sentence. If the king didn't find favor on you, you could be killed for talking to the king. So Esther wasn't just taking a risk by revealing her nationality, by revealing her ethnicity. She was taking a risk because if the king decided, nah, I don't really like that, she could be beheaded. And so it was a big risk for her to do that. And so what she does right here in chapter 5, verse 1. On the third day, Esther dressed in her royal clothing and stood in the inner courtroom of the palace facing it. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal courtroom facing its entrance. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she gained favor in his eyes. The king extended his gold scepter in his hand towards Esther, and she approached and touched the tip of the scepter. What is it, Queen Esther? The king asked her. Whatever you want, even to the half of the kingdom, will be given to you. If it pleases the king, Esther replied, may the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared for them. King said, hurry and get Haman so that we can do as Esther has requested. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. So Esther has this plan. She's devised this plan, and she says, okay, I'm going to have Haman and the king come, and we're going to have a nice little dinner, and we're going to chat, and we're going to talk about things, and we're going to solve this out. And so they have this dinner, they're having a talk, and right here in chapter 7 is where we're going to pick up again. It says, the king and Haman came to the feast with Esther the queen. Once again, on the second day, while drinking wine, the king asked Esther, Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you seek, even to the half of the kingdom, will be done. Queen Esther replied, if I have found favor in your eyes, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life. This is my request. And spare my people. This is my desire. For my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and extermination. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent. Indeed, the trouble wouldn't be worth burdening the king. King Ahasuerus spoke up and asked Queen Esther, who is this? And where is the one who had devised such a scheme? Esther answered, the adversary and an enemy. Oh, I lost my spot. The adversary and enemy is the evil Haman. So I just want you to picture just kind of a little garden area. Esther's got a little table set up. There's maybe some tea, some biscuits, and they're enjoying a little brunch. And so King Assyrius says, okay, Esther, we've talked about this before. What is it that you want? Even the half of my kingdom will be granted to you. And Queen Esther says, well, my people are going to be killed, destroyed, and we've been sold into slavery. If we would have just been servants, I've been okay with that. And the king answers, well, who is this? And this is what I could just picture. Haman is eating his biscuit, and Esther just points at Haman, the evil Haman. And I could imagine how Haman would have felt sitting there in the midst of this conversation, knowing, well, I done messed up. And the king, and this is what it says, is Haman stood terrified before the king and queen. The king arose in anger and went from there where they were drinking wine to the palace garden. Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, would he actually violate the queen while I'm in the house? As soon as the statement left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And so we see here that so Esther confronted the issue head on. She didn't beat around the bush. She didn't say, hey, there's this individual that's really causing me problems. Hey, my people are kind of in trouble. Hey, I kind of need some help. She went straight for the neck, and she said, listen, Haman is doing this to us. I need your help. And so she confronted the issue head on. She had to make a decision, and she was faithfully aggressive, and she confronted Haman. And so back in the time of Esther, I just want you to know, whenever a man's face is covered, whenever they cover your head, that means that execution is right around the corner. And so we see that first, that God provided for his people. He provided Esther to the Jewish people so that she can intercede on their behalf. That God provided for his people. And then now we see that God has protected his people from destruction. He provided and he protected. And so the next thing Esther did, the last point of the sermon, we're almost done, we'll wrap it up, is that, I am really over time. The last thing is that she followed through. Esther 7, verses 5 through 9. We read that earlier, but King Assyrius spoke up and asked Queen Esther, who is this? And so she confronted it head on. She didn't stop there. She followed through with it. And so after talking, they had dinner, and through her faithfulness, God was able to save her people. But this edict, remember the edict a long time ago that the king issued? What the king said about the Jews, that they were bound for destruction, that every man, woman, child was going to be killed and all their possessions looted. Well, when a king spoke or wrote an edict, it was done. There was no going back and changing it. You couldn't change the law. So once the king spoke, it was in stone. So what happens? Well, the king makes another edict. He says, the king's edict gave the Jews in each city, this is verse 11 of chapter 8. The king's edict gave the Jews in each city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and take their possessions as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Assyrius, and on the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar. And so this same edict that was bound to destroy the Jews actually turned out to save them. And later on in Scripture, you see that people were so terrified by this, they just started acting like Jews so that they wouldn't get persecuted. And so this edict that was meant for harm turned around, helped the Jewish people. So I'm almost done. So this woman who became an outcast, a nobody, from a conquered people to a queen, that she would save her people from death because of her faith and preparation. She took a bold step in faith that God has prepared for her. And she confronted an issue head on, and then she followed through on it. She didn't wait. She didn't wait till it was too late. She took action when she could. So now I'm going to ask you, are you going to be faithfully aggressive, or are you going to be fearfully passive? Now, don't get me wrong. It's easy to be fearfully passive. It's easy to set aside and to sit back and, well, that's not going to hurt me, so I guess I'll just let it slide. It's not going to bother me. It's not going to hurt my reputation. It's not going to hurt what I'm doing, so that's okay. Or are you going to take that step? Are you going to step forward in faith? Or are you going to say, no, I'm not going to stand for that. I'm not going to let these things happen. I'm not going to do that. Don't just lie down and get eaten by a bear or get eaten by or swallowed up by a snake. Take action. We've talked all weekend about the outcasts in our society, about the people on the fringe that need to be reached. There are people in your circles, in the youth and in the rest of the church and the adults. There are people that can be reached, that are outcasted. Take action. So, Esther, she was a great person. She did really great things for the Jewish people. She really did. But God sent us someone. God sent us an even greater Esther, one who was faithfully aggressive, who, just like Esther, would save his people from annihilation. And his name was Christ, Jesus Christ. And he is the greater Esther. He is far better than Esther, and he saves us from annihilation. Through the cross, through his sacrifice, through his shed blood, we no longer have to live in fear. We no longer have to cower and to ask for the fear for our lives and the fear for our livelihood, because God has us. Yes, you may lose material things, but your hope, like in the song, our hope is in him. He is our strong foundation. He is our greater Esther. So maybe you're facing a really big bear right now. Maybe on your walk in life, you've come across a bear and you don't know how to respond. You don't know how to tackle it. It could be something really big. It could be something really small. But you just need prayer. You just need help. I urge you, I beg you, don't lie down. Don't just take it. Take action. Move aggressively. Be faithful in what God has prepared for you and for what God's going to do through you. Pastor Mike and I are going to be up here. If you just need someone to pray for you, if you just need a shoulder to cry on, if you're saying, hey, I've got a situation in my life and I really don't know how to handle it. I don't know what to do. Come up here. Let's pray. Let's talk about this. So with that, I'm going to leave it up to Nate. I'll be right up here. Pastor Mike will be right up here.